What up, Marsh Pod? We're recording this on a Monday morning. We've got a full SimWorld U conversation to go down. We're talking really the fringe teams that are now rubber meeting the road. We saw in opening week of conference play some upsets, obviously. We saw some domination from top 10 teams. But what we're going to see now is a separation of the column last four in, you could probably go last 10 in right now. But this is where huge opportunities await a lot of teams. But first, a couple tidbits, and I saw some of these reported on, but I think they're still worth doubling down on. But some tidbits of context, if you will, for some of these top 25 teams. So we got, obviously, first time that Duke hasn't been ranked number one. I think they could return to number one, but they don't play. And I think this was a positive move by the voting committee to give some credit to Kentucky for going out there and getting a big win to open up conference play while Duke just sits there and does nothing. We're going to figure out a little bit more about Duke, obviously, as they get rolling in conference play. We've talked about that with Georgia Tech, with Virginia Tech. I think that North Carolina is the team that has the most to prove. They're a 10-6 team. That's the worst winning percentage of any other team in the top 20, and yet North Carolina sits there at number 10. And I think it begs the question, is this team actually the number 10 team in the country? Or is this a team that's just really riding high off the brand that they are surrounded by? I think it could be a little bit of the latter, but we're going to find out. And that's what I said this morning. Confirmation is coming in conference play. And it's not confirmation that anybody was right or wrong, but confirmation of, okay, we're getting a bigger picture of who you are. And 16 games is a large sample size, right? It's half of sample size, but it's not enough to sit here and say this is definitively who North Carolina is. It's not definitively who. I mean, Virginia Tech's a lot better sample size at 13-2, but we're going to figure out. And I think North Carolina is going to be a team that we could look back in let's say 3 weeks at the end of February, 3 to 4 weeks, and we could say they were a top 10 team. We thought they were a top 10 team. Or they're going to keep rolling, and it's going to be a confirmation of that. And we're going to say, okay, definitely a top 10 team. They just had some rough games early on. But the top 10 is getting figured out. This is, again, Duke we're going to get a little bit more of. How about Princeton? Okay, they've been ranked in the top 25 for 11 straight weeks. That's the second longest record in school history, and the longest they've been ranked that many times consecutively since 1998 when they went 15 weeks and peaked at number 8. Confirmation coming up for Princeton. The schedule is going to get a little bit tougher. You're going to now walk into the American Conference. You're going to have to play Memphis, who's number 11 in the country. You're going to have to play Jackson State, who's 9-8 and one of the hottest teams in the country. You're going to have to play Davidson, who's number 21 in the country. You're going to get a much tougher schedule. The positives for Princeton, you've got Richmond, who's 3 games under 500 overall as we enter conference play. Temple, 4 games under. Houston, 5-11. Harvard, 5-13, who Princeton's going to match up with in the Brainiac Bowl coming up this week. Wichita State, who's 3-13. They've lost 7 in a row. Princeton's got a shot to continue that. They need 4 more weeks. So end of February, we could be looking at a team that's met their new record for most weeks spent in the top 25. St. John's, they're up to number 12. That's their highest ranking since they were number 15 in 2015, so a decade ago. And they've been top 15 for 3 straight weeks, their longest streak since 1998-99, when they were in the top 15 for 13 consecutive weeks, also peaking at number 8. We're going to figure out a little bit more about St. John's, right? They had a great week. They beat SMU. They win over the weekend against VCU. You're going to find out who they are when they play against Villanova. We're going to find out more when they play Butler. We're going to find out who they are when they play UConn. We saw a little bit of who they are when they played Iowa, and I think that's why, if you look at them at 13-5, one of the best records in the nation, they're not ranked higher, because you look at that Iowa game, and they played a competitive one. They played a real competitive one, and they ended up losing it. And they say, okay, well, can they get over the hump? Now, that was part of, I think it was 4 or 5 games that week. I think it was 4 that they played, and they went 3-1. That's a positive. But we're going to get a little bit more confirmation on who this basketball team is. But they played exceptionally well, and they're putting together a great season by their program's historical standards. And then Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech has been a top 5 team now for 14 straight weeks. That is the longest streak in school history, bar none. Their previous longs were 8 straight weeks in 1986 and 6 straight weeks in 04 to 05. That is an impressive run. And I think it's obviously going to continue for a little bit longer. They're definitely going to be a top 10 team, barring a complete blowout of what they've done. You don't stumble into 14-2 as a mediocre team. I would be stunned if this team doesn't end up with 24 wins. I think it's a 10-win team in conference play when you're going to get the Wake Forest, Miami, Notre Dame, Florida State, Virginias. We're only going to see them play Duke, I think, once. It's just a damn shame that we're only going to get that once, because that is a massive answer to Player of the Year implications with Cooper Flagg and Donta Walker. So why do we say all this? Why do we say this about Princeton, St. John's, Georgia Tech? Because we have gotten into, at the professional level, this massive rings culture, right? If you don't win a championship, well, it's all for none, right? We just got done watching Josh Allen come up short against Patrick Mahomes in the AFC Championship game. He's now 0-4 in the postseason against Patrick Mahomes. And what we're going to sit here and say, and the legacy is at this point, and there's plenty more legacy to be written, the rest is still unwritten, as one Natasha Bedingfield once said. There is an opportunity for Josh Allen to turn that around. But when you look at a football team, and the professional sports in general, if you don't win a championship, those seasons just get dismissed as, well, you didn't win. It was fun, but you didn't win. And I think for college basketball, it's even harder to win than it is at the professional level because of just the number of teams that have an opportunity to knock you out. But let's enjoy this. Let's enjoy the fact that Princeton, for the first time in its program's history, well, let's not say first, for the second time in program history, is a team that is nationally recognized and nationally talked about. Let's appreciate that for the first time in 4 decades, St. John's is a relevant basketball team. Let's take a moment to recognize that Virginia Tech is a relevant basketball team for the first time in 4 decades. Let's recognize and appreciate the fact that Georgia Tech is one of the best teams in college basketball for the first time in 4 decades. Those are hard marks to hit. And if Georgia Tech doesn't end up winning the ACC or winning a national championship or making a run in Hoopsteria, we're going to look at this team and say, dismissed. We don't care. Let's not do that, because yes, the Dukes, yes, until this season, the Gonzagas, yes, the best teams in basketball, we expect them to be there. The Kentuckys of the world, right? We expect them to be there. Villanova. We anticipate that they're going to be relevant come the season's end. But that doesn't mean that's easy to accomplish. So for all the teams that are new, that are having their maybe the one-hit wonder, maybe it's a turning point of their program, we will find out next season. But let's not get too far along. And let's appreciate the fact that we are having career years for these head coaches and absolutely life-changing seasons for guys like Donta Walker, who has played himself into becoming a lottery pick, like Lamarian Sherwood, who has played himself into being a top 3 pick in college basketball, and Iowa back into being a relevant team in college basketball and a championship contender. Let's appreciate those moments before they keep moving on and they suddenly disappear from public consciousness. Coming back, the fringe teams. Okay, so you're going to hear all the talk. We're going to focus in on the best teams in college basketball. That's what we do. Now's the rubber meet the road, as we said earlier, for the teams that are in the middle. Okay, we're talking about Jackson States, the SMUs who just got bumped out of the top 25, who were just there, the Louisvilles, the Richmond's borderline. I'm just looking at teams that are 2 to 3 games within 500. The UConn Creightons, the Floridas, the Texas Techs, the Daytons, the Kansas States, the Baylors. These are the teams. We can keep rolling off these names of teams that are relevant. The St. Mary's, the Ohio States, Illinois, Purdue, Texas A&M, Auburn, Florida, California, Arizona, Oregon, USC, Utah. Those are all the teams that are sitting right now at 1 to 2 games above, 1 to 2 games below 500. This is now defining moments, okay? Because Auburn, you've got a team that's 8-9 right now, but they just took down the number 2 team in the country. Those are types of wins that the Hoopsteria Selection Committee is going to go back to at the end of this, and that's going to decide between a team that gets in or doesn't get in. Okay, I've already talked ad nauseum that we are very likely to get teams below 500 into Hoopsteria. It's just the way that this is playing out. The number of teams that are at and above 500 does not equal 64, which means that there's going to be teams below 500. Simple mathematics right there. Which means for a team like Auburn, who's 8-9, and they could be one of those teams that ends up above 500, and I do think the breaking point, if you're a team that's above 500, you're going to get into Hoopsteria. I think that's the line. That's the line of demarcation. So if you're looking and supporting a team or watching a team, watch that line at 500. If they get above it, they're getting in. If they get below it, suddenly there's question marks. And those question marks get answers when you have a team like Auburn, who takes down Alabama, number 2 at the time. Now they're number 6 at home. Now, Alabama could fall off. Alabama could end up as the 20th ranked team in the country. They could absolutely just lay an egg in conference play. I don't think that's going to happen. They're 15-2. This is a team, we talked about Georgia Tech probably getting to 24 wins. I'd be shocked if Alabama doesn't get to 25, 26 wins. Now, though, if you're Auburn and you're sitting there, and let's say you end up the season at 14-16, right? That's going to be good enough to get into Hoopsteria. Let's say this right now. A team of 14-16 is going to get into Hoopsteria. And Auburn is going to have the mark of saying, we beat Alabama. If you don't think we should get in, that's fine. Right? Maybe we are too far below 500 for your taste. But we went out and we beat Alabama. And if you look at all the other teams that are sitting in this below 500 but just barely range, which is probably going to be it, I would say 2 to 3 games under 500 is going to be the line in the sand. If you're an Auburn team, or you've got an opportunity like an Oregon, like a Texas A&M who's 9-8, like a Florida who was briefly ranked, if those teams fall below 500, the last 2 of whom are currently, you can start saying, well, we beat this team in conference play and this team in conference play. Okay? Your non-conference schedule, you can't really control who's a top 25 team and who's not. Conference play, you're getting top 25 matchups. And for these teams that are at or below 500, keep an eye on the wins that they rack up. If they start accumulating top 25 wins, whether it was them at the time, they were top 25 and they're not anymore, or the team is still a top 25 team by the end of the season, that's going to matter for the selection committee for Hoopsteria. All right, we're coming back to you next Monday right here. What are we going to talk about? It's time to dial in on SWBA. Rubber meeting the road. That is now. Trade deadline coming up on the 6th. All-Star break right around there as well. Time to dial in and keep track. MLK Day is kind of that moment where it's start paying attention for everybody else. So we'll do plenty of SWBA in the weeks to come. Appreciate you joining. We'll be back here next Monday.